Motivation is a lie. Not because motivation doesn't exist, but because you've been taught to depend on it. From the time you're young, the message is repeated in different forms. Follow your passion. Wait until you feel inspired. Do it when you're ready. So you wait. You wait for the right mood. You wait for energy. You wait for excitement to arrive like some invisible switch that suddenly turns you into a disciplined, focused version of yourself. And sometimes it does come. You wake up early. You feel sharp. You feel driven. You tell yourself this is it. This is the version of me I've been waiting for. But then a few days pass. Sleep gets shorter. Stress gets louder. Life gets heavier. And that version of you disappears. That's when the guilt starts. That's when you begin to think something is wrong with you. But there isn't. The myth of the always motivated person. You've been told that disciplined people wake up excited. That they feel ready. That they move through life powered by endless motivation. But look closer. The most disciplined people you know don't feel motivated most days. They feel tired. They feel bored. They feel resistance. They wake up with heavy eyes. They sit down to work without excitement. They start tasks with a quiet sigh, not a burst of energy. Yet they still show up. Not because they're special. Not because they love the process every day. But because they stopped waiting for a feeling that was never meant to be reliable. And that's the moment everything changes. Because discipline is not an emotion. It's a system. The first time he realized motivation wasn't coming, there was a man named Adam. Nothing about him stood out at first. Average job. Average schedule. Average dreams that lived quietly in his head and never fully stepped into the world. Adam used to believe deeply in motivation. He believed that one day he'd wake up and feel disciplined. That one morning he'd just know it was time to change. So he waited. And while he waited, months passed. Then years. He'd start things when motivation hit. A workout routine. A side project. A promise to himself. And every time motivation faded, so did the habit. Adam didn't think he lacked discipline. He thought he lacked motivation. Until one night, sitting alone in his apartment, scrolling aimlessly through his phone, something clicked. He wasn't tired because he was lazy. He was tired because he was waiting. Waiting for a feeling that never stayed long enough to build anything real. What motivation really is. Motivation feels powerful, but it's fragile. It's emotional energy. And emotional energy depends on sleep, mood, stress, environment. What happened 5 minutes ago? That means motivation can disappear because of one bad conversation. One bad night of sleep. One unexpected problem. If your discipline depends on motivation, your progress will always be unstable. That's why people start strong and quit quietly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. They just stop. And then they blame themselves. The quiet truth about disciplined people. Adam started watching the people he admired. Not influencers. Not motivational speakers. Real people. The coworker who trained every morning before work. The friend who steadily built a business over years. The writer who showed up daily even when no one was reading. He noticed something strange. They didn't talk much about motivation. They talked about schedules. Routines. Non-negotiables. They didn't say, I feel like working today. They said, this is what I do at this time. That's when Adam realized discipline wasn't something they felt. It was something they decided once. Discipline begins where feelings end. One morning, Adam woke up feeling exactly the same as usual. No excitement. No inspiration. Just the familiar weight of resistance. Normally that would have been the end of it. But this time he didn't ask himself how he felt. He asked a different question. What's the next small action? Not the perfect action. Not the full plan. Just the next one. He got out of bed. Put his feet on the floor. Didn't think any further than that. It felt insignificant. But it wasn't. Because discipline is built in moments that feel too small to matter. Why starting small is so hard. Most people don't fail because they lack discipline. They fail because their ego demands intensity. They want 2-hour workouts, perfect routines, immediate transformation. And when they can't maintain that intensity, they quit. Adam almost did the same. But he remembered something important. Consistency beats intensity. So instead of trying to change his entire life, he made one rule. 10 minutes. That's it. 10 minutes of focused work. 10 minutes of movement. 10 minutes of effort. Every day. No matter how he felt. Some days it felt easy. Most days it didn't. But 10 minutes was too small to argue with. And that's how discipline sneaks into your life. The resistance never leaves, you just stop obeying it. Adam expected resistance to disappear once he started being disciplined. It didn't. Resistance showed up every morning. It whispered, You can skip today. You deserve a break. You'll do it later. But Adam stopped treating resistance like a command. He treated it like background noise. He learned something most people never do. You don't eliminate resistance. You move with it. Discipline isn't about feeling strong. It's about acting while feeling weak. Discipline is a system, not willpower. Willpower is limited. By the end of the day, it's exhausted. That's why Adam stopped relying on it. Instead, he built systems. Same wake-up time. Same place to work. Same order of actions. No decisions. Because every decision drains energy. The less he had to decide, the easier it became to act. Discipline stopped being a daily battle. It became automatic. The identity shift. Something subtle changed after a few weeks. Adam stopped saying, "I'm trying to be disciplined." He started saying, "This is just what I do." That shift mattered. Because when you see discipline as part of who you are, not something you're chasing, behavior follows naturally. He wasn't forcing himself anymore. He was aligning himself. And alignment is more powerful than motivation ever was. The boring reality of discipline. Discipline isn't exciting. It's repetitive, predictable, quiet. There were days Adam felt bored out of his mind. But boredom no longer scared him. He realized boredom wasn't a sign he was failing. It was a sign he was consistent. And consistency is where progress hides. Missing a day without losing yourself. Adam still missed days. Life happened. But he learned a rule that saved him. Never miss twice. One missed day is human. 2 missed days become a habit. So when he slipped, he reset immediately. No guilt. No self-hate. No dramatic, starting over. Just back to the system. That's how discipline becomes sustainable. The quiet confidence that follows. Months passed. Adam didn't become a different person overnight. But he became reliable. To himself. And that changed everything. Confidence grew, not from hype but from proof. Proof that he could act without motivation. Proof that he didn't need the perfect mood. Proof that he could trust himself. That kind of confidence is unshakable. The truth about discipline. Discipline isn't something you're born with. It's something you train. Daily. Quietly. Without applause. You don't need motivation. You need small actions. Clear systems. Repetition. Self-trust. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline stays. And one day you'll look back and realize something powerful. You didn't wait to feel ready. You acted anyway. And that's what changed your life. Because discipline was never an emotion. It was always a system. And once you build it, you're no longer controlled by how you feel. You're guided by who you've trained yourself to be. Motivation is unreliable. You don't need a psychology book to know that. You felt it in your own life, maybe 100 times. One day you wake up and everything feels possible. Your mind is clear. Your body feels light. You're ready. You're energized. You're the version of yourself you keep promising you'll become. And then, without warning, another day arrives. Same life. Same goals. Same clock on the wall. But you feel different. You feel heavy. You feel tired. You feel irritated for no clear reason. You feel like you're moving through water. And suddenly, all that motivation from yesterday feels like it belonged to someone else. Comes when life feels good. It disappears when things get hard. That's not a flaw, it's its nature. Motivation isn't a contract. It's not a guarantee. It's not loyal. It's an emotional wave. Sometimes it rises high and makes you feel unstoppable. Sometimes it disappears so completely you wonder if you ever cared in the first place. That's why relying on motivation is like building a house on weather. When it's sunny, everything looks easy. When it rains, everything collapses. Motivation is emotional energy. And emotional energy changes with things you don't control as much as you think. Sleep. Some nights you sleep deep and wake up steady. Your brain feels quiet. Your thoughts line up neatly. You have patience. You have focus. You feel capable of doing hard things. Other nights you toss around. You wake up too early. You check the time. You fall back asleep for 10 minutes at a time. And when morning comes, your body is awake, but you're not really alive. It's not laziness. It's chemistry. It's exhaustion. Stress. Stress doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers all day long. A tight chest. A busy mind. A constant sense that something is wrong, even if nothing is happening in that moment. Stress steals mental bandwidth. It makes small tasks feel big. It turns simple decisions into complicated ones. It makes you crave comfort instead of effort. Mood is strange because it feels personal. It feels like you. But mood is often just your nervous system reacting to life. Traffic, conflict, loneliness, uncertainty, pressure. Mood can shift from one message, one conversation, one memory. And when mood drops, motivation usually drops with it. Environment. Some environments pull the best out of you. A clean room, a quiet desk, a supportive friend, a routine that keeps you steady. Other environments drain you. Noise, chaos, people who constantly distract you, a space that feels heavy, a routine that never stabilizes. And then you wonder why you can't stay consistent. But your consistency isn't just about desire. It's about conditions. If your discipline depends on motivation, your progress will always be unstable. Because motivation is unstable. It's like trying to drive a car that only starts when you feel like it should start. Some days it turns on instantly. Some days it refuses. And you're left sitting there staring at the wheel, wondering what's wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. You're just using the wrong fuel. This is why so many people start strong and disappear quietly. They don't disappear because they're weak. They disappear because they built their routine on excitement. And excitement has an expiration date. At the beginning of anything, motivation comes easily. A new goal feels clean. A new plan feels powerful. A new version of you feels close. The first workout is exciting because it's a fresh start. The first week of studying feels good because you still believe it will be easy. The first few days of a project feel thrilling because you're imagining the finished result, not the hard middle. And in that early stage, motivation feels like proof. You think, see? I'm ready now. This time is different. But then life happens. A bad night of sleep. A stressful week. A small setback. A delay. A boring day. A moment of doubt. And when things get hard, motivation doesn't usually rise to meet you. It leaves. And that's where the quiet disappearing happens. Not in one dramatic decision, but in small choices that feel harmless. I'll do it tomorrow. I'm too tired today. I'll restart next week. Today doesn't count. And suddenly days become weeks. Weeks become months. And the goal that once felt so alive becomes a distant idea again. Something you talk about, something you wish you had done, something you feel guilty thinking about. That's the cycle. Motivation starts the fire. But it doesn't keep it burning. Discipline does. Discipline isn't built when things feel easy. It's built when they don't. This is the part people don't want to hear because it's not inspirational. It's honest. Discipline is what shows up when motivation is missing. It's what carries you through the days you don't feel like doing anything. The days when the work feels boring. The days when nothing feels rewarding. The days when you're unsure if it's even working. Discipline is not a feeling. It's a decision you make again and again even when it doesn't feel good. Especially when it doesn't feel good. Imagine two versions of the same person. One version waits to feel ready. They wait for motivation. They wait for the perfect mood, the perfect time, the perfect energy. And sometimes they get it. They have a burst of productivity. They do a lot. They feel proud. But then life gets messy and they stop. The other version doesn't wait. They have a simple rule. I do what I said I would do even when I don't feel like it. Not perfectly. Not endlessly. Not with extreme intensity. Just consistently. Even if the workout is shorter. Even if the study session is messy. Even if the progress is small. They show up. And over time that becomes identity. They stop asking, do I feel motivated? They start asking, what does the disciplined version of me do today? This is where stability is born. Because discipline doesn't rise and fall with emotions. It's anchored to something deeper, commitment. But let's be real, discipline is not glamorous. Discipline is waking up when you want to sleep. It's working when you'd rather scroll. It's starting even when the first 5 minutes feel painful. It's doing the simple thing repeatedly without applause. Discipline is a quiet kind of strength. It's not loud like motivation. Motivation screams, let's go. Discipline whispers, do it anyway. And the whisper is the one that changes your life. Because when you learn to act without motivation, you become dangerous, in the best way. Not reckless. Not aggressive. Dangerous because you're no longer dependent on your mood. Your mood can be low, and you still show up. Your day can be stressful, and you still show up. Your confidence can be shaky, and you still show up. That's when progress becomes stable. And stable progress is what creates results. Here's what most people never realize. You don't become disciplined by waiting for discipline. You become disciplined by practicing it in the moments you don't want to. The first time you do the hard thing while you feel unmotivated, it feels awful. Your mind complains. Your body resists. You think this is pointless. This is too hard. I'm not in the mood. But if you do it anyway, even for 10 minutes, you prove something important to yourself. You prove you're not controlled by how you feel. And that proof changes your self-respect. Self-respect is built through evidence. Not by talking. Not by planning. Not by promising. But by doing what you said you'd do. Even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient. That's why discipline builds confidence. Not the fake confidence that comes from hype. Real confidence. The kind that comes from knowing, I can trust myself. Because when you can trust yourself, motivation becomes optional. Motivation becomes a bonus. A helpful push. But it's no longer the engine. So what does discipline actually look like in real life? It doesn't look like perfection. It looks like showing up when you're tired and doing the minimum that keeps the habit alive. It looks like reducing the task so you can still complete it. If you can't do an hour, do 15 minutes. If you can't write a chapter, write one paragraph. If you can't do the full routine, do the first step. Discipline is not always intensity. Sometimes discipline is simply refusing to break the chain. Because momentum isn't built through big days. It's built through consistent days. And consistent days are usually ordinary, quiet, and boring. But boring is where growth lives. The reason people disappear quietly is because they don't respect the boring part. They expect it to feel exciting. They expect progress to feel like motivation forever. But motivation is only the beginning. The middle requires discipline. The middle is where results are built. And the middle is where most people quit because the story stops feeling dramatic. The progress slows. The praise disappears. The novelty fades. The work becomes routine. That's the test. Not, can you start? But, can you continue? Discipline isn't built when things feel easy. It's built when they don't. It's built when you're tired. When you're busy. When you're stressed. When you don't feel like it. When no one is watching. When nothing feels rewarding yet. That's when discipline becomes real. Because in those moments, every action is pure. You're not doing it for the rush. You're doing it because you decided. And that decision, repeated over time, becomes your new normal. One day you'll look back and realize something. The days you didn't feel motivated were the most important days. Not because they were productive in a flashy way, but because they taught you how to keep going. And once you learn that, you stop disappearing quietly. You stop starting over. You stop needing a perfect mood to make progress. You become steady. And steady is unstoppable. Here's the truth nobody tells you. Discipline is not something you have. It's something you practice. Just like a muscle. And the reason nobody tells you this, really tells you this, is because it ruins the fantasy. The fantasy that one day you'll wake up different. The fantasy that motivation will suddenly arrive like a sunrise and you'll finally become the version of yourself you keep imagining. The fantasy that disciplined people are simply built that way, like they were born with some secret switch other people don't have. But that's not how it works. You don't wake up disciplined. You train discipline through repetition. And most days it doesn't feel inspiring. It doesn't feel glamorous. It feels quiet. Feels boring. It feels like doing the thing when your mind is full of excuses and your body is heavy and your emotions are begging you to choose comfort. That's the real training. The morning you don't feel like it. There's a moment most people recognize but rarely talk about. It's early. Your phone alarm buzzes and your eyes open just enough to read the time. Your body immediately makes a case for staying where you are. 5 more minutes. You deserve rest. Yesterday was hard. You'll start tomorrow. Today can be a break. And honestly, none of those thoughts sound evil. They sound reasonable. That's the trick. Discipline doesn't usually fight against obviously bad choices. It fights against choices that feel harmless in the moment, but expensive over time. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, and you feel the internal tug of war. Consider it. You don't want to move. Your blanket feels warm. Your mind starts negotiating like it's a lawyer trying to win a case. But somewhere deeper, quietly, almost like a whisper, you feel another voice. Not loud. Not emotional. Just honest. If you stay, you'll feel relief for 10 minutes, and disappointment for the rest of the day. And that's usually when you realize something. This isn't a motivation problem. This is training. Discipline isn't a mood. People treat discipline like a personality trait. They say things like, I'm just not disciplined, as if it's a permanent label. Like eye color. Like height. But discipline isn't a mood you either have or don't have. It's a practice. A skill. A decision you repeat. And repetition changes you. Not overnight. Not in a dramatic transformation. But in tiny ways that stack. It's like lifting a weight that feels impossible at first. The first time your arms shake. Your breath gets shallow. Your mind screams, stop. But you do 1 rep. Then another. Then you put it down and you don't feel like a superhero. You just feel tired. Yet something happened. Your body learned. And discipline works the same way. Every time you act without wanting to, you strengthen it. Every time you wait to feel ready, you weaken it. The quiet moment where people lose. This is where most people get stuck. They keep asking the same question. Do I feel like it? Do I feel like working today? Do I feel like going to the gym? Do I feel like studying? Do I feel like writing? Do I feel like being patient? Do I feel like staying consistent? And because feelings change like weather, the answer is often no. So they wait. They wait for the perfect mood, the perfect energy, the perfect moment. But the perfect moment is a myth. It's not coming. And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to start, because now you're not just fighting laziness, you're fighting your own history of delay. That's when discipline starts to feel like something you don't have. But it's not missing. It's just untrained. What discipline actually looks like. Discipline doesn't look like being intense all the time. It doesn't look like never struggling. It doesn't look like waking up excited every morning. Most of the time, discipline looks like doing small things with a calm, steady refusal to argue with yourself. It looks like making your bed even when nobody will see it. It looks like starting the work before you feel confident. It looks like choosing water when you want sugar. It looks like opening the book when your brain is tired. It looks like showing up for the boring parts. Because that's what builds a disciplined life. The boring parts. Not the highlights. Not the big speeches. Not the dramatic, I'm changing my life today moment. Just the quiet follow-through. The day you realize ready isn't required. There's a point in every person's growth where they realize something uncomfortable. Feeling ready is not a requirement for action. In fact, if you wait until you feel ready, you'll stay stuck for years. Because ready is often a feeling that comes after you start. Confidence often shows up after you've done the work a few times. Strength comes after repetition. Clarity comes after movement. And discipline, the kind that changes your life, comes after you stop waiting for permission from your emotions. It begins when you stop asking, do I feel like it? And start asking, what's the next required action? That question is cold in the best way. It's clean. It removes drama. It removes excuses. It turns your big overwhelming goal into one simple step. Not the whole staircase, just the next step. The next required action. This is where life gets real. Because the next required action is often small. Almost annoyingly small. It's not change your entire life. It's open the laptop. Write one paragraph. Do 10 minutes. Send the email. Wash one dish. Put on the shoes. Stand up. Start. That's it. And your brain will try to insult that small step. It'll say, that won't make a difference. But it does. Because discipline is not built through huge heroic moments. It's built through proving to yourself, over and over, that you can do what you said you would do even when you don't feel like it. That proof changes the way you see yourself. And how you see yourself determines what you consistently do. The inner conversation that changes everything. The hardest part of discipline is not the action. It's the conversation before the action. That's where the battle is. It's the moment you're about to begin and your mind starts throwing every excuse it can find. You're too tired. You can do it later. You don't have enough time. You're not in the mood. You'll do it when you feel more confident. You'll do it when things calm down. And sometimes you believe those excuses because they sound protective. But then you remember the pattern. Every time you delay, you teach yourself that your feelings are in charge. Every time you act anyway, you teach yourself that you are in charge. That's what discipline is. Choosing who leads. Your emotions or your standards. The cost of waiting. Waiting feels harmless. That's why it's dangerous. Because waiting doesn't hurt immediately. It just quietly steals time. It steals momentum. It steals trust in yourself. And after a while, the biggest pain isn't even that you didn't achieve the goal. It's that you start to doubt your own word. You start to feel like you can't rely on yourself. You tell yourself you'll do something and deep down you don't fully believe it. That's a heavy feeling. It's like living with someone who keeps breaking promises, except that someone is you. Discipline repairs that relationship. Repetition rebuilds trust. Not with big promises, with small follow-through. The muscle moment. Think about the first time you tried to do something hard consistently. Maybe it was fitness. Maybe it was work. Maybe it was prayer. Maybe it was learning a skill. Maybe it was just trying to wake up earlier. The first days feel rough. Your body resists. Your mind complains. Everything in you wants to return to the old normal. But then you do it again. And again. And slowly something shifts. Not because it got easier, though sometimes it does, but because you got stronger. That's the muscle. Discipline gets stronger the same way. One rep at a time. And here's the part that matters. The reps that count the most are the ones you almost skipped. The days you didn't feel like it. The days you were tired. The days you wanted to quit. Those reps are the ones that build the version of you you've been waiting for. Discipline is self-respect. At some point, discipline stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like self-respect. Because you realize you're not doing this to suffer. You're doing this because you care about your future. You care about the person you're becoming. You care about not wasting your own potential. And that care looks like structure. It looks like standards. It looks like choosing the long-term win over the short-term comfort. Not perfectly. Not every day. But more often than before. And that's enough to change everything. The disciplined life begins. The disciplined life begins the moment you stop making your emotions the decision maker. Not because emotions are bad, but because emotions are temporary. They change hourly. And if you let something temporary control something important, your life becomes inconsistent. So you stop asking, do I feel like it? And you start asking, what's the next required action? And then, this is the key, you do that action. Not because you're inspired. Not because you're confident. Not because it feels good. But because it's required. Because it's the step your future needs from you. And every time you do it, you build the muscle. Every time you act without wanting to, you strengthen it. Every time you wait to feel ready, you weaken it. So you stop waiting. You breathe. You choose. You take the next required action. And little by little, repetition turns into identity. You don't just try to be disciplined. You become someone who practices it. Every day. One rep at a time. Most people fail at discipline because they start too big. They don't start with something realistic. They start with a version of themselves that only exists in motivation, not in real life. It usually happens on a clean day, a Monday, a first of the month, a fresh notebook page, a morning where the air feels like possibility. And in that moment, it's easy to believe you're about to become a new person overnight. So you plan big. You plan the 2-hour workouts. You plan the perfect routines. You plan the massive goals. You write it all down like a promise, like a contract with your future self. Wake up at 5 a.m. Gym for 2 hours. Cold shower. Read 50 pages. No sugar. No distractions. Work 10 hours. Build the dream life. And for a few minutes, it feels incredible. You feel powerful just imagining it. But then reality shows up. Not dramatic reality. Normal reality. The alarm goes off and your body feels heavier than your ambition. Your mind says just 5 more minutes. The day starts moving before you're ready. Someone needs you. Something goes wrong. Your energy is lower than you expected. Your mood isn't perfect. Your motivation disappears like it was never there. And suddenly the plan feels impossible. Not because you're lazy. Because you tried to build discipline on intensity. The quiet moment you quit. People rarely quit loudly. They don't stand up and declare, I'm giving up. They quit quietly. It's a small choice that feels harmless. I'll skip today and start again tomorrow. I'm too tired, I need rest. I've had a long day, I deserve a break. I'll do it when I have more time. And at first it's true. One day doesn't ruin your life. But the problem isn't the one missed day. The problem is what happens in your head after the missed day. Because once you break the streak, the mind starts negotiating. It starts creating comfort stories. See, you never stick to anything. You always start strong and fade. What's the point? You're not disciplined like other people. And now it's not just about working out or writing or learning or saving money. Now it's about identity. Now it feels personal. So instead of returning to the plan with a smaller step, most people abandon the whole thing. They feel like they failed. But they didn't fail because they weren't capable. They failed because they tried to go from 0 to perfect. Discipline doesn't grow from intensity. Discipline doesn't grow from intensity. It grows from consistency. That's the truth nobody wants at first because consistency is not exciting. Intensity feels heroic. Intensity feels like you're transforming. Intensity gives you a rush. Consistency feels small. Consistency feels ordinary. Consistency is quiet. And that's why it works. Because discipline is not built in one dramatic moment. It's built in the boring moments. The normal moments. The days where nothing feels special. Discipline is built when you show up when you don't feel like it. Not with a huge effort. With a small one. The goal isn't to impress yourself. A lot of people start big because they're trying to impress themselves. They want to feel like a different person instantly. They want the movie moment of turning their life around. They want to see themselves doing something extreme so they can say, look at me. I'm serious now. But the goal is not to impress yourself. The goal is to show up daily. Because your life doesn't change from what you do once. It changes from what you do repeatedly. And repeated actions don't need to be dramatic. They need to be real. 1 page, 5 minutes, 1 task. This is where discipline becomes honest. Not grand. Honest. You don't aim for a 2-hour workout. You aim to put on your shoes and move for 5 minutes. You don't aim to write a whole chapter. You aim to write 1 page. You don't aim to build the perfect routine. You aim to do 1 task. 1 simple action that you can do even on a bad day. Especially on a bad day. Because that's the secret. The habit that survives your worst days becomes permanent. If your plan only works when you feel motivated, it's not discipline. It's mood. Discipline is what stays when motivation leaves. What consistency actually feels like. Consistency doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like making yourself do the small thing when you want to do nothing. It feels like opening the book even when your brain feels foggy. It feels like doing the push-ups even when your mood is low. It feels like writing the sentence even when you don't feel inspired. It feels like choosing the smaller plate even when you want comfort. It feels like showing up with a little bit of effort. Just enough to keep the chain unbroken. And over time, something shifts. At first, you're dragging yourself. Then you're guiding yourself. Then you're just doing it. Not because you're forcing it, because it's who you are now. Why small actions beat heroic efforts? Small actions done daily beat heroic efforts done once. Because heroic efforts cost too much. They cost energy. They cost time. They cost emotional intensity. And you can't live in heroic mode. No one can. Life won't allow it. Life has tired days. Busy days. Hard days. Days where you feel heavy. Days where you feel unmotivated. Days where everything feels like it's working against you. If your plan requires you to be your best self every day, you will quit the moment you feel human. But small actions fit inside real life. They fit inside stress. They fit inside chaos. They fit inside low energy. And because they fit, you do them. And because you do them, you win. The day it becomes automatic. There's a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when discipline becomes automatic. It doesn't happen with a celebration. It doesn't come with a big reveal. It's just one day where you do the habit without arguing with yourself. You don't debate it. You don't need motivation. You don't need a perfect mood. You just do it. And later you realize, wait, that used to be hard. That's how you know discipline is growing. Not because you're doing more. Because it's costing you less. The hidden power of too easy. People underestimate too easy. They think if it's easy it doesn't count. But too easy is where habits are born. Because too easy removes resistance. And resistance is what kills discipline. The hardest part of any habit isn't the habit itself. It's starting. It's crossing that mental line from thinking about it to doing it. So when you make the habit small enough, you remove that fight. You make starting effortless. And once you start, you often do more than you planned. But here's the important part. Even if you don't do more, you still win. Because you showed up. You're not building a perfect day. You're building a reliable you. That's what discipline really is. Not perfection. Reliability. You become the person who does what they said they would do. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet way. You start trusting yourself again. And that trust changes everything. Because when you trust yourself, you stop needing motivation. You stop needing external pressure. You stop waiting for the right time. You act. And action builds identity. This is how discipline becomes automatic. It starts small. So small you almost doubt it matters. But then you do it again tomorrow. And again. And again. Not intense. Not perfect. Consistent. 1 page. 5 minutes. 1 task. And slowly the habit becomes part of your day the way brushing your teeth is part of your day. You don't celebrate it. You don't overthink it. You just do it. That's when discipline becomes automatic. Not because you became a different person overnight, but because you became the kind of person who shows up daily. Most people fail at discipline because they start too big. They plan 2-hour workouts, perfect routines, massive goals, and then quit. Discipline doesn't grow from intensity. It grows from consistency. The goal is not to impress yourself. The goal is to show up daily. 1 page, 5 minutes, 1 task. Small actions done daily beat heroic efforts done once. This is how discipline becomes automatic. Choice is exhausting. Most people don't realize how much energy they lose before they even start. They think the exhaustion comes from the work. From the gym, the studying, the writing, the hard conversation, the early morning. But the real drain happens earlier. It happens in the tiny moments where you stand at the edge of action and ask yourself, should I do it or not? That question looks harmless. It sounds reasonable. Feels like freedom. But it quietly eats your strength. Because every time you decide whether to act, you drain energy. Not physical energy. Mental energy. The kind you don't notice until it's gone. The hidden battle before the work. It starts the moment you wake up. Your alarm rings. You open your eyes. And before your feet touch the floor, the debate begins. I should get up. But I'm tired. I stayed up late. I'll start tomorrow. No, I said I'd start today. And suddenly you haven't even moved yet. But you're already fighting. That's why some days feel heavy before they even begin. Not because your life is impossible. But because you're using your mind like a courtroom every morning. Arguing your case. Negotiating your own promises. Asking for permission from the version of you that wants comfort. Choice is exhausting because it turns every habit into a decision. And decisions pile up. Death by 1,000 decisions. People underestimate how many decisions they make in one day. What to wear. What to eat. Whether to reply now or later. Whether to work or scroll. Whether to go outside or stay in. Whether to start the task or delay it. Each one seems small. But small choices don't stay small when there are hundreds of them. By the time evening comes, you feel unmotivated. But maybe you're not unmotivated. Maybe you're just mentally depleted from negotiating all day. That's why the worst habits usually win at night. Not because you're weak, because you're tired of deciding. And the brain always chooses the easiest option when energy is low. Disciplined people don't decide daily. This is where disciplined people are different. They don't wake up and ask, do I feel like it today? They don't start each day from zero. They decide once. And then they remove the option to negotiate. That's the secret nobody tells you. Discipline isn't just willpower. It's architecture. It's building a life where the right action becomes the default. Not because you're always strong, but because you stop depending on strength. Deciding once. There's a moment that changes everything. It's not loud. It doesn't come with dramatic music. It's a quiet internal shift where you say, this is what I do now. Not I'll try. Not I'll see how I feel. Not I'll do it when life calms down. You decide once, clearly. And then you set up your life to make that decision easier to keep. Because you understand something important. If you have to choose the habit every day, you'll eventually choose comfort on a hard day. So you stop giving yourself the daily vote. Locking routines into place. Disciplined people lock routines into place like gears. Same time. Same process. Same trigger. It becomes predictable. Not because they love rigid life, but because predictability removes friction. Friction is what kills habits. Not effort, friction. That subtle resistance. That I'll do it in a bit feeling. That where do I even start? Confusion. So they simplify. They create a pattern their brain can follow without thinking. The trigger is everything. Most people rely on motivation to start. Disciplined people rely on triggers. A trigger is a moment that automatically tells your brain, now we do the thing. Can be after brushing your teeth, after making coffee, when you sit at your desk, when you put on your shoes, when the clock hits a certain time. It's not fancy, but it's powerful. Because once the trigger becomes consistent, your brain stops debating. It starts moving. Like a train leaving the station at the same time every day. Not because it's excited, because it's scheduled. The same process. The process matters too. If your routine changes daily, your brain stays alert and uncertain. It asks questions. What do I do first? How long will this take? Do I have everything I need? Is this the right way? Those questions seem small, but they create resistance. So disciplined people eliminate questions. They make the process the same. Same warm-up. Same playlist. Same notebook. Same first step. Not because they lack creativity. Because they respect energy. They know mental energy is a limited resource. They don't waste it on decisions that can be automated. When action becomes automatic, resistance disappears. This is the magic moment. Not when you suddenly love the work, but when the work becomes automatic. Automatic doesn't mean easy. It means unquestioned. Like buckling your seatbelt. You don't wake up and wonder if you'll do it today. You just do it. That's what habits become when they're locked into routine. And when action becomes automatic, resistance disappears. Because resistance feeds on uncertainty. It feeds on hesitation. It feeds on the feeling that you still have a choice. The truth is, you do have a choice. But disciplined people make the choice ahead of time. And then they live inside it. You don't negotiate with habits, you execute them. There's a specific feeling that disciplined people recognize. It's the moment your brain tries to bargain. It says, not today. Just this once. You deserve a break. You can make it up tomorrow. That voice sounds logical. It sounds caring. It sounds like it's trying to protect you. But it's not protecting you. It's protecting your comfort. And comfort always has a convincing argument. So disciplined people don't argue back. They don't debate. They don't negotiate. They execute. Not with anger. Not with force. With calm. Like it's already decided. Like the decision is not up for discussion. Because it isn't. The emotional reality of bad days. Bad days are where most people lose their progress. Not because bad days destroy ability, but because bad days destroy motivation. On a bad day, everything feels heavier. Your body is slow. Your mind is foggy. Your emotions are loud. Even small tasks feel like climbing. And the old version of you shows up. The version that wants escape. The version that says, let's just survive today. And sometimes, yes, survival is enough. But here's what disciplined people understand. Bad days don't need big effort. Bad days need automatic effort. Because discipline isn't designed for your best days. It's designed to protect you on your worst. This is how discipline survives bad days. On a bad day, you don't rise to motivation. You fall to systems. That's why routines matter. Because on the days you feel strong, you don't need discipline. You feel inspired. But inspiration is unreliable. It comes and goes. Discipline is what stays. And discipline stays when it's built into your environment. Built into your time. Built into your triggers. Built into your identity. So when the day is ugly and you don't feel like yourself, your routine still holds you. You don't have to be motivated. You only have to follow the next step. Brush teeth. Drink water. Put on shoes. Start timer. Begin. Not heroic. Just consistent. And consistency survives storms. The quiet power of just do the next step. Here's what most people get wrong. They think discipline means you wake up feeling powerful. But real discipline often looks like this. You feel tired. You feel annoyed. You feel unmotivated. And still, you do the next step. Not the whole journey. Just the next step. Because the routine is already decided. And once you start, something shifts. Not always joy, but momentum. And momentum is often enough to carry you through. The identity shift. At some point, the routine stops feeling like a task. It starts feeling like who you are. You're not a person who tries to work out. You're a person who works out. You're not someone who hopes to be consistent. You're someone who is consistent. That shift matters. Because when it becomes identity, it stops being effort. You don't ask yourself, will I do it? You ask yourself, when will I do it? And that's a completely different life. And choice is exhausting. Every time you decide whether to act, you drain energy. Disciplined people don't decide daily. They decide once. They lock routines into place. Same time. Same process. Same trigger. When action becomes automatic, resistance disappears. You don't negotiate with habits. You execute them. And this is how discipline survives bad days. Not through motivation. Through systems. Through automation. Through a decision made once. And honored again and again. Even when you don't feel like it. Willpower runs out. You can feel it in your body when it happens. It's that moment late at night when you've been strong all day, made the healthy choices, stayed polite in conversations that tested you, held your tongue, pushed through work, answered messages, kept promises, and then, out of nowhere, you're standing in your kitchen staring into the fridge like it has answers. Not because you're hungry, because you're tired. Tired in a way sleep doesn't fix immediately. Tired in a way that makes your brain reach for the easiest comfort it can find. That's the thing people don't talk about enough. Willpower isn't a personality trait. It's a battery. And batteries drain. In the morning you can say, I'm going to work out today, and it feels clean, strong, possible. But by evening the day has taken pieces of you. A stressful call. A long commute. A deadline that kept shifting. A family message that pulled at old emotions. A small disappointment that you shrugged off but still carried. Then the gym feels far. The book feels heavy. The task feels impossible. So you negotiate with yourself. I'll start tomorrow. I've earned a break. I'll just do it later. And in those moments it's not that you're lazy. You're just running on empty. Willpower runs out. Identity doesn't. That's what changes everything. Because identity isn't a battery. It's a compass. It doesn't depend on how your day went. It doesn't vanish because you're stressed. It doesn't collapse because you're tired. Identity is what you return to when motivation is gone. It's the quiet sentence under your breath that says, this is who I am. And if you're honest, most of your struggles aren't because you don't know what to do. You know what to do. You know the workouts that would help your body. You know the habits that would calm your mind. You know the skills that would change your life. You know the tasks you keep delaying. The gap isn't knowledge. The gap is identity. Most people live with an identity that sounds like this. I'm trying. I'm working on it. I'm not consistent. I always start and stop. I'm just not disciplined. And here's the painful truth. Your identity is always working. Even when you don't notice it, it shapes how you act. It shapes what you tolerate. It shapes what you believe is possible for you. So when you say, I need to work out, it's not just a sentence. It's a signal that working out is something external. Something separate from you. Something you have to force. It turns training into a chore. A duty. A temporary phase. And your brain hears it like an obligation. Something you should do. Something you'll do when you have time, energy, motivation, perfect conditions. But perfect conditions don't show up often. Real life shows up. That's why the shift matters. Instead of saying, I need to work out, say, I'm someone who trains daily. That sentence doesn't just sound different. Feels different. Because now you're not trying to borrow willpower. You're acting from identity. And identity has weight. When you tell yourself, I'm someone who trains daily, you're not promising a perfect week. You're choosing a standard. It's not about intensity. It's not about being extreme. It's about consistency becoming normal. And at first your mind fights it. It says, who are you to say that? You missed last week. You skipped last month. You haven't been consistent in years. And that's where most people stop. They think identity is something you earn after you change. But identity is something you choose before the change becomes visible. Not blindly. Not delusionally. But intentionally. You pick the direction. Then you provide proof. Instead of, I should focus. Say, I don't quit tasks halfway. This one hits different because it touches your pride. Not ego, pride. The part of you that wants to respect yourself. Because deep down you're not actually afraid of hard work. You're afraid of disappointment. You're afraid of starting strong then fading again. You're afraid of seeing yourself repeat the same pattern. You've lived through that cycle. A burst of motivation. A promising start. A few good days. Then one messy day. Then another. Then silence. And then that heavy feeling, here we go again. So you protect yourself by not committing fully. You keep goals vague. You keep your effort inconsistent. You keep your plans flexible. Because if you never fully commit, you never fully fail. But it also means you never fully win. That's why identity matters. When you say, I don't quit tasks halfway, you're not demanding perfection. You're demanding completion. You're telling your brain, we finish what we start. And when you repeat that, something starts to shift in your behavior. Not because you're suddenly motivated, but because you're trying to stay aligned with the person you said you are. That's the secret most people miss. You don't rely on motivation. You act in alignment with who you believe you are. That alignment becomes a kind of internal pressure. Not stressful pressure, but stabilizing pressure. Like a spine. Think about the days when you did show up even without motivation. The day you went for a walk when you didn't feel like it. The day you finished a task even though you were bored. The day you said no to something tempting because you knew it would pull you backward. What made you do it? It wasn't excitement. It was identity. Even if you didn't name it that way. Something in you said, this is what I do now. And in that moment, you weren't trying. You were being. When your identity shifts, behavior follows. Not instantly. Not magically. But consistently. At first it's awkward. It feels like wearing clothes that don't fit yet. You say, I'm someone who trains daily, and you still want to skip. You say, I don't quit tasks halfway, and you still feel the urge to run when it gets hard. That's normal. Because the old identity doesn't disappear overnight. It argues. It tries to pull you back into what's familiar. But this time you don't debate for hours. You don't wait for motivation to arrive like a late friend. You do something small. You give yourself proof. Not affirmations. Proof. Because identity is built by proof, not affirmations. This is where people get it wrong. They think identity is created by repeating phrases in the mirror. I'm disciplined. I'm confident. I'm focused. But if your life doesn't reflect those words, your brain rejects them. It feels fake. It feels forced. It feels like lying. And your mind doesn't cooperate with a lie. Your mind cooperates with evidence. Proof is what makes identity believable. Not what you say about yourself. What you show yourself. One workout when you didn't want to. One task finished fully even when it got annoying. One day of showing up in a small way. That's proof. And proof is powerful because it's quiet. It doesn't need to be posted. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need permission. It's between you and you. And every piece of proof changes your internal story. You start to think, maybe I am the type of person who shows up. Not because you wished it, because you earned it. That's why the most important changes in your life won't start with a huge transformation. They'll start with a small act that contradicts your old identity. A small act that says, I'm not that person anymore. Maybe it's waking up 10 minutes earlier, not to become a morning person, but to become someone who keeps promises to themselves. Maybe it's doing a 5-minute workout, not because it's impressive, but because it's consistent. Maybe it's finishing one task completely before switching to the next, just once so you can feel what completion feels like again. Because completion is addictive in a healthy way. It restores self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of identity. When you don't trust yourself, every plan feels fragile. You set goals and immediately doubt them. You make schedules and already assume you'll break them. You promise yourself things and secretly expect disappointment. So you keep relying on willpower. And willpower keeps running out. But when you start building proof, something steadier replaces it. You begin to trust your own word. And that's when identity becomes real. Not a quote. Not a mantra. A lived experience. You start acting like the person you said you were because you've seen yourself do it. Even on tired days. Even on low days. Even on days when nobody is watching. And that's the real definition of discipline. Not intensity. Not motivation. Not hype. Alignment. You act in alignment with who you believe you are. And the more you act in alignment, the more believable that identity becomes. It becomes less like something you're trying to become, and more like something you simply are. So the next time you feel willpower fading, and you will, don't panic. Don't shame yourself. Just return to identity. Not a perfect identity. A chosen one. I'm someone who trains daily. I don't quit tasks halfway. I keep promises to myself. I do the hard thing even when it's small. Then give yourself one piece of proof. Just one. Because one piece of proof beats 1,000 affirmations. And after enough proof you stop needing willpower. Not because life becomes easy, but because you become someone who doesn't depend on easy. Willpower runs out. Identity doesn't. And the strongest identity isn't built by words. It's built by evidence, quiet, consistent, undeniable evidence. Proof that you showed up. Proof that you finished. Proof that you kept going. And once you have proof, you don't need to convince yourself anymore. You already know who you are. Discipline is not exciting. It's not fireworks. It's not a highlight reel. It's not the kind of thing people clap for in real time. Discipline is repetitive, predictable, quiet. And that's exactly why it works. Most people don't quit because something is impossible. They quit because it becomes boring. Because the early excitement fades, and what's left is the part nobody romanticizes. The same steps, the same routine, the same effort, day after day with no guarantee anyone will notice. That's where this story begins. The day motivation didn't show up. It was one of those mornings where everything felt heavier than it should. Not because something terrible happened. Not because life was falling apart. Just because the feeling wasn't there. You woke up and stared at the ceiling for a few seconds, letting your eyes adjust. The room was quiet. The air felt still. Even your phone screen looked tired, like it didn't have anything new to offer. And the thought came soft but clear. I don't feel like doing it today. You knew what it meant. The workout. The writing. The studying. The practice. The routine you promised you'd stick to. The thing you were building. You sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on your knees, and tried to negotiate with yourself like you had 100 times before. Maybe I'll do it later. Maybe I'll skip today and start fresh tomorrow. Maybe I've been pushing too hard. I deserve a break. And the scary thing wasn't that those thoughts came. The scary thing was how reasonable they sounded. That's what boredom does. It doesn't scream. It doesn't attack. It gently suggests quitting. The truth about the middle. People love beginnings. Beginnings are exciting. They're clean. They come with hope. A new goal feels like a new identity. You feel energized. You feel focused. You feel like this time is different. And sometimes it is, at first. But there's always a stage nobody posts about. The middle. The stretch where progress is slow. Where days feel the same. Where results don't show up on time. That's where discipline becomes real. Because in the middle, motivation stops carrying you. In the middle, you either build a system, or you stop. And most people stop right there, not because they can't do it, but because it's not exciting anymore. Why discipline feels so quiet? Discipline doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with adrenaline. It looks like brushing your teeth, like tying your shoes, Like opening your laptop even when your brain feels foggy. It looks like doing the same thing again. When nobody is watching. When nobody cares. When you don't feel inspired. And that's why it's powerful. Because excitement is loud and loud things burn out fast. Discipline is quiet. It doesn't burn. It builds. Most people chase excitement. You see it everywhere. People start something new and talk about it like it's already done. They buy the equipment. They post the plan. They tell everyone what they're about to become. And for a while it feels good. They're running on excitement. The emotional rush of beginning. But excitement has a weakness. It's dependent on feeling. The moment the feeling changes, the effort stops. That's why so many goals die in the same place. Not at the hard part. At the boring part. At the repetition. At the quiet days that don't feel special. Disciplined people chase results. Disciplined people aren't more gifted. They don't always have more energy. They're not robots. They just made a decision most people avoid. They chose results over feelings. They understand that the real work doesn't feel dramatic. Real work feels like the same task again. And again. And again. They also understand something crucial. Boredom is not a signal to stop. It's a sign you're doing real work. Because if you're repeating something long enough for it to become boring, that means you're in the zone where growth actually happens. And that's the zone most people never reach. The moment you almost quit. That morning you stood up slowly. Not with confidence. Not with excitement. Just with acceptance. You went through the motions like a person trying to prove something to themselves. You drank water. You washed your face. You looked in the mirror and didn't feel inspired by what you saw. Just normal. And your mind whispered again. This doesn't matter. One day won't change anything. That's the lie boredom always tells. Because boredom wants you to think repetition is pointless. But repetition is not pointless. Repetition is a vote. Every time you show up, even half-hearted, you're voting for the person you want to become. And you don't become that person through one heroic moment. You become them through hundreds of boring ones. The small, unseen victories. You did it anyway. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe it wasn't your best. But you showed up. And later that day, something interesting happened. Nothing external changed. No one congratulated you. No medal arrived. No dramatic transformation appeared in the mirror. But inside you, there was a quiet shift. Not happiness. Respect. Self-respect. Because deep down you knew. I didn't do that because I felt like it. I did that because I said I would. That's the kind of promise that changes people. It's not loud. But it's strong. Mastery lives inside repetition. Mastery doesn't live in talent. Talent is helpful. But it's not reliable. Mastery lives inside repetition. Inside the parts nobody sees. The extra rep when you want to stop. The page you write when you feel empty. The practice session that feels like nothing is improving. Mastery is built through accumulation. Like water wearing down stone. Not dramatic. Just consistent. And that's why discipline is boring. Because mastery requires you to do the same thing long enough that the novelty dies. Then you keep going anyway. The myth of feeling ready. A lot of people wait to feel ready. They wait for the perfect mood. The perfect timing. The perfect moment when effort feels natural. But discipline doesn't wait for feelings to cooperate. Discipline is what you do when feelings don't. When you're tired. When you're discouraged. When you're bored. Especially when you're bored. Because boredom is the point where your brain stops getting easy dopamine. It stops getting rewarded for simply starting. And now it has to learn something deeper. Effort without immediate reward. That is real work. That is maturity. That is discipline. The quiet routine that changes everything. Over time the routine becomes normal. And that's another moment people misunderstand. They think normal means it's not working. But normal is the goal. Normal is when the habit becomes part of you. When you don't need to hype yourself up. When you don't need to feel motivated. When you don't need external pressure. You just do it. Like breathing. Like showing up. And one day without realizing it, you look back and see results that surprise you. Not because you had some magical breakthrough. But because you stayed long enough for repetition to do its job. The day you realize you've changed. It happens quietly. You wake up one morning and the same routine is waiting. And you do it. Not because you're excited. But because it's who you are now. And that's when you realize the truth. Discipline didn't just change your output. It changed your identity. You're no longer someone who starts. You're someone who finishes. You're no longer someone who relies on motivation. You're someone who relies on commitment. And that's power. Not flashy power. Real power. The final lesson. Discipline is not exciting. It's repetitive. Predictable. Quiet. and that's its power. Most people chase excitement. Disciplined people chase results. They understand something crucial. Boredom is not a signal to stop. It's a sign you're doing real work. Because mastery doesn't live in intensity. Mastery lives inside repetition. Your environment controls your behavior more than your mindset. Most people don't want to hear that at first because it sounds like it removes personal responsibility, like it's giving your power away to your surroundings. But the truth is, it does the opposite. Once you understand how much your environment shapes you, you stop blaming yourself for not being disciplined enough, and you start building a life that makes discipline feel natural. Because if temptation is nearby, discipline becomes harder. Not impossible, just harder. And when something is harder every single day, you eventually get tired. Even strong people get tired. Even motivated people slip. Not because they're weak, but because they're human. I learned that in the most ordinary way. It wasn't a dramatic failure. It was small, repeated, almost invisible. I'd sit down to work with a clear plan. The kind of plan that looks good in your head. Today I'm going to focus. Today I'm going to get it done. I'd open my laptop. I'd take a breath. And then, my phone would buzz. Just once. Not even something important. A notification, a message, an app reminding me of something I didn't need to know right now. And without thinking, my hand would reach for it. Not because I wanted to get distracted. It was more automatic than that. Like scratching an itch. Like turning your head when someone says your name. 5 seconds became 5 minutes. Then 10. Then the familiar frustration would creep in, quiet, sharp, personal. Why am I like this? Why can't I just focus? What's wrong with me? And I do what most people do. I try to fight it with mindset. I tell myself I needed stronger discipline. More willpower. A better morning routine. A more motivational playlist. I'd watch videos about productivity and feel inspired for an hour. But the next day it would happen again. Because the environment hadn't changed. The phone was still right there. And that's the part people underestimate, how powerful right there is. Temptation doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be close. Close enough that you don't have to think. Close enough that you don't have to decide. Close enough that your body can move before your mind even catches up. That's why disciplined people don't rely on self-control. They design their surroundings. They don't treat discipline like a personality trait. They treat it like a system. They ask, what is making my good behavior harder? And then they remove it. They ask, what is making my best habits inconvenient? And then they make them easy. It sounds simple, but it changes everything. I remember the moment it clicked for me. I was watching someone I respected, quietly consistent, the kind of person who always seemed calm and productive without making a big show of it. We were in the same space for a few hours working on different things. And I noticed something. They didn't keep checking their phone. Not once. At first I thought, wow, their self-control is insane. But then I saw their phone. It wasn't on the table. It wasn't beside their laptop. It wasn't within easy reach. It was away. Put somewhere that required effort to get up and grab it. And that's when I understood. It wasn't willpower. It was design. They weren't constantly resisting temptation. They had simply placed temptation outside the path of least resistance. They removed friction for focus. They created friction for distraction. That's the whole game. Because friction is real. When something is easy, you do it more. When something is hard, you do it less. We pretend we're above that, but we're not. The snacks are on the counter, you eat them. If the guitar is in its case under the bed, you don't practice. If the book is on your pillow, you read. If your phone is on your desk, you scroll. It's not moral failure. It's proximity. It's convenience. It's environment. So I tried something small at first. I took my phone and put it in another room while I worked. Not turned face down. Not silent mode. Not, I'll just ignore it. Another room. And something strange happened. My brain kept reaching for it anyway. I'd feel the impulse and my hand would move toward where the phone usually was. Then I'd stop, confused for a second, like a person reaching for a light switch in a new house. And in that tiny pause, I had a choice. That pause was the gift. Because when the phone was right next to me, there was no pause. It was impulse action. Every time. But when the phone was away, impulse met friction. And friction created awareness. Awareness created choice. And choice created discipline, without the emotional battle. For the first time, discipline felt less like fighting myself and more like guiding myself. That's when I started understanding what disciplined people actually do. They don't wake up every day and hope they'll be strong. They prepare. They set the room up so the good thing is easier than the bad thing. They make the right decision the default. Phone away. Tools ready. Distractions removed. Not because they're perfect, because they're practical. I began to look at my own space differently. Not as a room, not as a background, but as a silent influencer. A force that nudged me all day long, toward focus or away from it. And once you see it that way, you can't unsee it. I noticed how my desk was cluttered with random things. Papers, cables, half-finished notes, items that had nothing to do with what I needed to do. Every time I sat down, my attention scattered across the mess. Not dramatically, just enough to make starting feel heavier. So I cleared it. Not perfectly. Not Pinterest perfect. Just clear enough that the first thing my eyes landed on was my work. I noticed how I always had to search for the tools I needed. Charger here, notebook there, pen missing, headphones under something. That constant searching created tiny frustrations, and those frustrations made procrastination feel more appealing. So I set my tools up. Notebook open. Pen ready. Laptop charged. Files where I could find them. I removed the tiny excuses, and then I looked at distractions. The obvious ones first: phone notifications, social media, open tabs. I started closing everything that didn't serve the task. I logged out of apps. I used focus modes. I removed shortcuts from my home screen. But then I noticed the sneaky distractions. The ones that don't look like distractions but act like them. The TV remote on the couch. The game console visible under the screen. The endless just-in-case apps on my phone. The constant background noise of a group chat that never stops. None of these were evil. But they were nearby. And nearby makes you weaker. Not because you lack character, but because your brain is always negotiating. Every time you choose discipline in an environment that invites distraction, you spend energy. You spend attention. You spend emotional fuel. And you only have so much. That's why people feel good in the morning and fall apart by night. Not because they stopped caring. Because they ran out of fuel. So disciplined people don't keep spending fuel on the same battle. They remove the battle. They remove friction. They stop relying on self-control. Because self-control is expensive. Environment is cheaper. This is what people misunderstand about discipline. They picture someone forcing themselves, grinding through discomfort, white-knuckling every urge. Sometimes that happens. But that's not sustainable. Sustainable discipline is quiet. It's not dramatic. It's small choices made ahead of time that prevent chaos later. It's setting your clothes out the night before. It's keeping healthy food within reach. It's leaving your phone outside the bedroom. It's creating a workspace that makes focus feel natural. It's arranging your life so your future self doesn't have to fight as hard. And there's something emotionally calming about that. Because when you stop framing discipline as, I need to be stronger, you stop constantly feeling like you're failing. You stop turning every distraction into a character flaw. Instead, you start thinking like a designer. What is pulling me off track? What is making my good habits inconvenient? What can I remove? What can I prepare? What can I simplify? That mindset is kinder. More grounded. It doesn't shame you. It supports you. And the moment your environment supports you, discipline becomes easier. Not effortless, but easier. And easier is everything. Because easy repeats. Easy becomes routine. Routine becomes identity. You don't become disciplined by having one perfect day. You become disciplined by making the disciplined choice the easiest choice, again and again, until it feels like who you are. I remember the first week after I adjusted my environment. It wasn't a miracle. I still had moments of restlessness. I still wanted to check my phone. I still had cravings to escape when the work got uncomfortable. But the difference was, my environment was no longer helping my worst habits. It wasn't whispering distractions into my ear. It wasn't leaving temptation on the table like an open invitation. For once, the room felt like it was on my side. And that created a sense of calm I didn't expect. Because when the environment supports discipline, you stop feeling like you're constantly wrestling your own mind. You stop treating your day like a test of willpower. You start moving with more ease. You sit down and begin. You take breaks without falling into a trap. You finish tasks without needing a pep talk. Not because your mindset suddenly became perfect, but because you stopped asking your mindset to do all the heavy lifting. That's the hidden truth. Mindset matters. But environment decides what mindset you actually get to live in. It decides what you're exposed to, what you're reminded of, what you're tempted by, what feels normal. If you want discipline, don't just promise yourself you'll be better. Make it easier to be better. Put the phone away. Get the tools ready. Remove distractions. Not as a trend. As a form of self-respect. Because the goal isn't to prove you have willpower. The goal is to build a life where you don't need to fight yourself every day. And when you finally do that, something changes inside you. Discipline stops feeling like pressure. It starts feeling like peace. Because the environment is no longer pulling you in two directions. It's supporting the person you're trying to become. And that's when discipline becomes easy, not because you became superhuman, but because your surroundings finally stopped working against you. Consistency is recovery speed. Failure is inevitable. Quitting is optional. That truth sounds simple when you hear it in a clean sentence, like something you'd nod at and move on from. But in real life, it doesn't land like a quote. It lands like a weight. Because failure doesn't show up politely. It shows up in the middle of your routine. In the middle of your plan. In the middle of a week where you promised yourself you'd do better. It shows up as the day you don't go. The workout you skip. The project you avoid. The message you don't send. The habit you break. And what hurts isn't always the failure itself. It's what your mind does next. That voice that jumps in fast like it's been waiting. See, you never stick to anything. See, you're not disciplined. See, you're back to being you. That voice doesn't just point out one missed day. It tries to turn it into an identity. And that's where most people lose. Not because they failed, but because they spiraled. Missing once. It happens on a normal day. Nothing dramatic. You wake up and you feel off. Not sick, not broken, just heavy. Like your body is full of sand. You look at the clock and you do the math in your head. If I go now, I'll be late. If I rush, I'll feel worse. If I skip today, I can make up for it tomorrow. You make the deal. Just this once. And in the moment, it feels harmless. Like you're being flexible. Like you're being kind to yourself. Missing once is human. It's life. Life interrupts. Energy drops. Things happen. The problem isn't the miss. The problem is what the miss means to you. Because a missed day comes with a question. What do you do next? 2. The trap after the miss. This is where most people don't realize they're standing at a fork in the road. On one side is a simple return. Okay, I missed. I'm back tomorrow. On the other side is a story. A long, emotional, exhausting story. The story sounds like this. I ruined it. I was doing so well. I always mess up. What's the point now? It's dramatic, but it feels real in your chest. And here's the weird part. The story can feel more convincing than the truth. Because the truth requires responsibility. The story gives you an excuse. If you believe you ruined it, then quitting feels justified. If you believe you always mess up, then trying feels pointless. If you believe you're not disciplined, then you don't have to face the hard work of building discipline. The story protects you from discomfort. But it also steals your future. Missing twice. The rule is simple. Missing once is human. Missing twice is a pattern. The second miss rarely feels like a decision. Feels like momentum. Because after the first miss, your brain learns something dangerous. We can skip. It becomes easier. Not because you're lazy, but because your mind is always trying to save energy. Always trying to choose comfort. So the next day comes. You wake up and that same heaviness is there. Or maybe you feel fine, but now there's something else. Something quieter and sharper. Guilt. And guilt is exhausting. Guilt makes you want to avoid the very thing that would fix it. You tell yourself, I'll start fresh on Monday. I'll do it when I feel motivated again. I'll restart when life is calmer. But life never becomes calm on schedule. And the longer you wait, the heavier it gets. Because now it's not just a miss. Now it's a pattern forming. And patterns become identities if you let them. For what disciplined people do differently? Disciplined people don't have some magical personality trait. They don't wake up excited every day. They don't feel motivated all the time. They don't avoid failure. They just respond to failure differently. Disciplined people forgive quickly and return immediately. That's it. They don't make the miss personal. They don't make it proof. They don't make it a reason to hate themselves. They don't spiral. They don't self-hate. They reset. And resetting doesn't look dramatic. Resetting looks like brushing your teeth even after you ate something sweet. It looks like cleaning one dish even if the sink is full. It looks like doing 10 minutes instead of 0. It looks like showing up messy. Resetting is humble. It's not a comeback. It's not a transformation montage. It's a simple decision that says, I'm not turning this into a collapse. 5. The quiet moment of choice. Imagine it. You're sitting there, phone in your hand. You're scrolling, half numb. You can feel time slipping and that familiar pressure builds in your stomach. You know you should do the thing. But your mind starts bargaining again. It's already late. I'm already behind. I'll do it tomorrow properly. That word, properly, is a trap. Because properly often means perfectly. And perfection is the best excuse to do nothing. So you sit there and you feel that tug of war inside. One side wants comfort. The other side wants respect. Not respect from others. Respect from yourself. And in that moment, a disciplined person doesn't ask, "Do I feel like it?" They ask, "What does a reset look like right now?" Maybe the reset is small. Maybe you don't do the full workout. Maybe you just put your shoes on and walk for 10 minutes. Maybe you don't write a full chapter. Maybe you open the document and write one paragraph. Maybe you don't fix your whole life tonight. You just return. Because returning is the win. 6. Why spiraling feels so real. Spiraling has a certain emotional pull. Feels like honesty. When you tell yourself, "I'm terrible," it feels like you're being realistic. When you beat yourself up, it feels like accountability. But it's not. Self-hate is not discipline. Self-hate is a distraction from discipline. Because while you're spiraling, you're not working. While you're judging yourself, you're not building. While you're drowning in guilt, you're not moving. Spiraling feels intense, so it tricks you into thinking you're doing something. But you're not. You're just stuck. Disciplined people don't waste energy on punishment. They use energy for recovery. 7. The real skill: recovery speed. Consistency is not perfection. It's recovery speed. This is the part that changes everything. Most people think consistency means never missing. They imagine disciplined people as machines. But discipline is not a streak. It's a return. Because life will always punch holes in your routine. You'll get tired. You'll get overwhelmed. You'll have days where emotions win. That's normal. The only question is, how fast do you come back? 1 day? 2 days? A week? A month? A year? Recovery speed decides your life. Not talent. Not motivation. Not potential. Recovery speed. 8. What reset actually looks like. Resetting is not always inspiring. Sometimes it feels embarrassing. Because you remember how strong you were last week. You remember how consistent you were for those few days. And now you're back to basics. Back to day one. But disciplined people don't fear day one. They don't treat day one like a failure. They treat it like a doorway. They know that starting again is not shameful. It's the whole game. So they keep it simple. They don't negotiate with their emotions for hours. They do the next right thing. Even if it's small. Even if it's imperfect. Even if no one knows. Especially if no one knows. Because discipline is who you are when no one is watching. 9. The forgiveness that creates momentum. Disciplined people forgive quickly. Not because they're soft. Because they understand the math. Shame slows you down. Guilt drains you. Self-hate keeps you stuck. Forgiveness restores movement. When you forgive yourself, you free your energy to return. And forgiving yourself doesn't mean saying, "It's fine." It means saying, "I'm human. I missed. Now I'm back." That's a grown decision. That's leadership over your own mind. 10. The difference between a slip and a slide. A slip is a miss. A slide is what happens when you attach a story to the miss. A slip says, "I didn't do it today." A slide says, "I never do anything right." A slip is normal. A slide is optional. And the way you stop the slide is by resetting fast, before your mind has time to turn one moment into a full identity. Missing once is human. Missing twice is a pattern. So you interrupt the pattern early. You don't wait to feel ready. You return while it still feels uncomfortable. Because that discomfort is a sign you still care. Earn confidence. Here's the best part. Every reset builds something inside you. Not just progress. Not just results. Trust. Self-trust. Because every time you come back quickly, you send yourself a message. I don't abandon myself. And that is a powerful thing to know about yourself. It changes how you move through life. It changes how you handle setbacks. It changes your identity from someone who tries to someone who returns. And returning is what makes you unstoppable. Not because you never fall, but because you don't stay down. 12. The rule that saves you. Failure is inevitable. Quitting is optional. And the rule is simple. Missing once is human. Missing twice is a pattern. So disciplined people do something that looks almost boring from the outside, but is revolutionary on the inside. They forgive quickly. They return immediately. They don't spiral. They don't self-hate. They reset. Because consistency is not perfection. It's recovery speed. And the faster you recover, the less power failure has over your future. Not because you became flawless. Because you became someone who always comes back. Below is a fully expanded, emotionally immersive story built directly from your script. The tone remains grounded, honest, and quietly powerful, with a natural voiceover rhythm, deep inner reflections, and a smooth, continuous flow. The core message is untouched, only expanded, humanized, and given emotional weight. The day you stop waiting. One day something shifts. It doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic music, no sudden rush of clarity, no moment where everything magically feels easy. It happens quietly, almost unnoticed, in the middle of an ordinary day. You wake up the same way you always do. Same ceiling. Same light slipping through the window. Same responsibilities waiting for you. Nothing on the outside looks different. But inside, something has moved. You don't reach for motivation anymore. Not because you're suddenly inspired. Not because you feel strong or excited or confident. You just don't ask the question anymore. You don't ask, do I feel like it today? You don't wait for energy to show up. You don't wait to feel ready. You act because it's time. And that's the moment everything begins to change. When motivation stops working. For a long time, motivation felt like the key. You waited for it. Chased it. Watched videos late at night hoping something would light a fire inside you. Some days it worked. You felt unstoppable. Focused. Driven. And then, it faded. Motivation always fades. You'd promise yourself tomorrow would be different. You'd start strong, then slow down. Miss a day. Then another. And suddenly you were back where you started, frustrated, disappointed, questioning yourself. You began to notice a pattern. On days you felt motivated, life moved forward. On days you didn't, everything stalled. Your progress depended on your mood. And moods are unreliable. That realization hurts more than people admit. Because it forces you to confront an uncomfortable truth. Waiting to feel ready is another form of delay. The quiet decision. The shift doesn't come from anger. Or desperation. Or even ambition. It comes from acceptance. You get tired, not physically but mentally, of negotiating with yourself. Tired of convincing. Tired of restarting. Tired of watching time pass while you prepare to begin. So one day, without ceremony, you stop waiting. You don't feel confident. You don't feel prepared. You don't feel motivated. You just do the thing anyway. You show up. You start. You move. Not because you want to, but because it's time. Acting without emotion. At first it feels strange. There's no rush. No excitement. No emotional reward. Just action. You work when you're tired. You stick to the plan when it's boring. You keep going when nothing feels different yet. And that's when something unexpected happens. Confidence starts to grow, but not the loud kind. Not the kind that announces itself. The quiet kind. The kind that comes from keeping promises to yourself. You begin to trust yourself again. Not because you feel strong, but because you're consistent. Trust is built, not felt. Trust in yourself doesn't come from positive thinking. It comes from evidence. Each time you do what you said you would do, even when you didn't feel like it, you add a small deposit into something powerful. Self-trust. You start believing your own words again. When you say, I'll do it tomorrow, you actually do. When you set a plan, you follow it. When things get uncomfortable, you don't disappear. Slowly, quietly, your relationship with yourself changes. You stop doubting every decision. You stop overthinking simple actions. You stop asking for permission from yourself. Life becomes predictable in the best way. There's a strange comfort that comes with discipline. Life becomes predictable, not dull but stable. You know when you'll work. You know when you'll rest. You know what needs to be done today. There's less chaos in your mind because fewer decisions are up for debate. You don't wake up wondering how the day will go, you've already decided. That predictability feels like relief. No more emotional roller coasters. No more dramatic restarts. No more guilt-filled nights promising change. Just steady movement forward. Discipline isn't restriction, it's freedom. This is where most people get it wrong. They think discipline is punishment, control, limitation. But discipline doesn't trap you, frees you. Freedom from moods. Freedom from excuses. Freedom from regret. You're no longer at the mercy of how you feel. You don't lose days because you're tired or discouraged. You don't abandon goals because motivation didn't show up. You move forward anyway. And that consistency gives you something rare. Peace. Freedom from moods. Moods are temporary. Discipline is steady. When you rely on how you feel, life becomes unpredictable. Some days you're unstoppable. Other days you're stuck. Discipline removes that uncertainty. You don't ask, am I in the mood? You ask, what needs to be done? And then you do it. Feelings come later or not at all. Either way, the work gets done. Freedom from excuses. Excuses don't disappear overnight. They just lose power. You still hear them. You're tired. You can skip today. You deserve a break. But now they don't decide your actions. You acknowledge them and move anyway. That's when excuses stop controlling your life. Not because you eliminated them, but because you stopped obeying them. Freedom from regret. There's a quiet satisfaction that comes at the end of a disciplined day. Not joy. Not excitement. Because you know you showed up. You know you did what needed to be done. And no matter how imperfect the outcome was, you don't carry regret into the night. You sleep easier when you keep your word to yourself. You don't need motivation. At some point this truth becomes clear. You don't need motivation. Motivation is unreliable, emotional, temporary. What you need is structure. You need systems that work even when you don't feel like working. You need systems. Systems remove decision fatigue. You don't debate when to act. You already decided. You don't negotiate effort. The system sets the minimum. You don't rely on willpower. You rely on routine. Systems turn progress into habit. And habits don't need motivation. You need repetition. Repetition isn't exciting, but it's powerful. Doing the same small actions again and again rewires your identity. You stop trying to be disciplined. You just are. Your actions become automatic. Your standards become non-negotiable. What once felt difficult now feels normal. That's how real change happens. You need commitment. Commitment isn't emotional. It doesn't care how you feel today. It doesn't adjust for comfort. It doesn't disappear when things get hard. Commitment is a decision you made in advance. And each day you honor it. Training discipline daily. Discipline isn't something you're born with. It's trained. Daily. Through small choices that don't feel impressive. Through showing up when no one is watching. Through doing the work without applause. Each day you train it, discipline grows stronger. And you grow steadier. The moment of realization. Then one day quietly, unexpectedly you notice something. You're doing the work, without resistance. Not because it's easy. Not because you love every moment. But because it's who you are now. You don't need to hype yourself up. You don't need external pressure. You don't need perfect conditions. You act because that's what you do. Who you became. You became the person who does what needs to be done. Whether you feel like it or not. That identity is powerful. Because it means your life is no longer controlled by emotion. Your progress is no longer fragile. Your future is no longer dependent on motivation. You're dependable to yourself. And that changes everything. Real power. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't need inspiration. Real power is quiet consistency. It's discipline showing up daily. It's action without emotion. It's commitment without drama. And when you realize you've become that person, the one who acts regardless of how they feel, you understand something deeply. That's not discipline anymore. That's freedom. That's control. That's real power.